picks up right where we left off on the previous video. That last, not the last step, but that step where you have to divide by your coefficient on everything, this is what happens when it doesn't divide out evenly. I kind of thought it would be nice to keep the two ideas separate instead of running it together and having a 20-minute video. So that's my goal here. What happens when these things don't divide out evenly? The nice thing is it's really the same process. You just kind of work with fractions. And I know that sounds disgusting to have to work with fractions inside of a polynomial, but the way we work with them, it's really not that bad. Okay. If you keep in your head that when you half something, right, what you guys are probably doing is dividing it by 2. What I'm doing is I'm taking, like in this case, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll explain it when we get to it. I need to make a whole. Okay, so that's n squared minus 13n. Leave my whole in here. And then negative 9 plus 25 is what, 16? Okay, now to fill in this gap, I need to take half of that middle term. Okay, so you guys are probably in your head dividing by 2. 13 divided by 2 is 6.5. And then you're like, oh crap, I've got to square 6.5. Don't do it that way. 13 divided by 2 is just 13 halves. Right? Don't actually divide it out. So when I take half of 13, that's 13 over 2. And when I square 13 over 2, that's 169 over 4. So I'm going to fill in this gap with 169 over 4. You're probably thinking that's nasty. Same thing over here, 169 over 4. We'll talk about adding these guys together here in just a second. But this left-hand side, as ugly as that is, it's going to factor into n minus 13 over 2 squared. Just like all the other ones that we did, what winds up being in your factor here, in your binomial squared, is half of that middle term. Well, this is half of 13 over 2. Okay, so when I factor it, I've got 13 over 2 as in my set of parentheses. It's not as bad as it looks. Now, probably the trickier part is going to be adding these guys, 16 and 169 over 4. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 16 and I'm going to make it a fraction that has a denominator of 4. So the way you do that is you multiply it by a special case of 1. I'm going to multiply it by 4 over 4. So 16 times 4, well, let's see, that's 64 over 4. So instead of having 16, I'm going to make this, let me make a hole here. I'm going to make this 64 over 4 that I'm going to add to the 169 over 4. So 64 plus 169 is, what's that, 3, 2, 5. So 2, my brain's not working, guys, sorry. 3 carry the 1, so 233 over 4. I'm not trusting my brain right now. Yeah, 233 over 4. Okay? Leave them improper. That probably goes against everything that you want to do, but leave them improper. So when I take the square root of this side and the square root of this side, yep, we are still doing square roots. These are some ugly fractions. Here's the cool thing. Square root of a square, it just spits out, whoops, one too many lines there. It just spits out the n minus 13 over 2. Square root of this nasty fraction, that's going to be positive and negative. Square root of 233 over 2. Where'd that 2 come from? Okay, so I'm going to add 13 to both sides. I'm not going to tell you, figure it out. I'm going to add the 13 over 2 to both sides, so this is going to be 13 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 233 also over 2. Now, if you wanted to, you could put those two fractions together because they both have the same denominator. Maybe that's something that we can talk about when we get back together on Friday. This looks awful. I realize that this just looks like a big hot mess, but working with the fractions inside of the polynomials really isn't as bad as it seems if you don't divide by 2 in your head, right? If you keep everything as fractions. So when you want to divide by 2, just put it over 2 as a fraction. When you want to square it, just square the numerators and denominators. When you want to make it a fraction, it's really not that bad. All right, let's try another one. Same deal. I need to make a whole, so I'm going to add 21. So that's going to be 26 on the right. Half of 11 is 11 over 2. So when I square that, that's 121 over 4. Okay? You do a few of these, you can do them in your head. So this is going to factor into x minus 11 over 2 squared. And this guy, little scratch work here, 26 times 4 over 4. That is 80 and 24, so that's 104 over 4. And I'm going to add that to 121, so that is 225 over 4 when I add those guys together with a denominator of 4. Okay, now I'm going to keep it that way. So when I take the square root, excuse me, I get x minus 11 over 2 equals positive and negative. And if you didn't know it, 225 is a perfect square and 4 is a perfect square. So when I go to add these guys together, 11 over 2 plus or minus 15 over 2. And again, you can smush those together if you want. Your answer would look like 11 plus or minus 15 over 2. Okay, that's going to roll right into the quadratic formula when we get to it next week. All right, last one, hopefully. And again, try these. Turn them in if you want, or just bring them in on Friday and we'll take a look at them. So I'm going to move my 61. So it's going to be 2n squared plus 5n equals 63 on the right. Divide out the 2. You still have to do that first before you complete the square. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. N squared plus 5 over 2n equals 63 over 2. Now, half of 5 halves, right? It's already being divided by 2, so 5 divided by 2. When I divide that by 2 again, right, 5 halves, I'm going to take half of that again. That's 5 fourths. So I'm going to square that, 25 fourths. So this guy factors, this guy factors, into n plus 5 fourths squared. On this right-hand side, I'm going to make this, I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 2 to make it have a denominator of 4. So that is 126 plus 25. 126 plus 25 is 151 over 4. Square root both sides. I know you guys are sick of this. You probably checked out a couple minutes ago, but I didn't need those parentheses. Plus minus square root 151 over 2. Where'd the 2 come from? All right, so I'm going to subtract my 5 fourths from both sides. N equals negative 5 fourths plus or minus the square root of 151 over 2. Okay? It's a lot. I know it's a lot. Just try them. Okay? I didn't give you 100 questions for homework. There's 5. Give them a shot. See what you can do.